Our next story takes place in the final years of the Ming Dynasty. Now, a man arrived in Beijing for the palace examinations. He was calm, he was prepared, he was confident, but within 3 days, he would be fighting for his life. What happened in that small house still defies explanation. But before we begin, if you're drawn to stories with mystery, meaning, and the otherworldly, to legends passed down as truth, then this is the channel for you. I share new stories each week, drawn from folklore, forgotten history, and strange events that linger at the edge of belief. So tap the like button and subscribe with all notifications on so you never miss what's next. Let's begin. So, during the Ming Dynasty, a young man named Yu came to the capital to take the imperial exam. So, he was from a well-off family in Shanxi province. He was the son of a military commander, and his dad would always have him do all these martial arts training. So, as a boy, he would actually take these large kettles full of water and spin them, looking like some giant pinwheel. And he would go to the markets and show off his strength. Even though he was on the path to become a court official, he saw himself as a warrior at heart. So he arrived in the capital with a group of friends, some guys that he grew up with, and they were also there to take the exam. But they did not all lodge in the same place. Yu and his servant rented a small house just to themselves, a few streets away from the main exam quarters, while his friends stayed in a local inn. So 3 days before the exam, his servant just kind of collapsed. He got this horrible fever. So Yu got a local doctor to come take a look at him, but the doctor couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. So they gave him some medicinal herbs. Yu brewed those up himself for his servant, but nothing seemed to get better after he took them. He was starting to get a little concerned. And one friend mentioned, he's like, I know this is a little different, but there is rumor that in the marketplace, there is this fortune teller who is known for uncanny predictions. Now, at first, he was like, that's a superstition, tricks for the weak-minded, right? I'm not going to go to some fortune teller for a fever, but there was something about the servant's condition. He really didn't have any other options. He didn't know what to do, and he could just see the unease in his friends' faces, and so he decided to go. So they went to the stall. It was tucked between a calligrapher and this guy who sold dried lotus root. And when they arrived, the man at the stall didn't look up. He just said, "You've come about the boy. He'll recover. But you, Mr. Yu of Shanxi, you only have 3 days to live." At that point, Yu froze a little. "You crossed someone," he said. "They sent for you. A debt is owed, one you thought you buried. Each debt must be repaid. A life for a life." Okay, at that point, you kind of paused. Just thought, what's going on here? "But," the man added, 10 taels of silver, and I can perform a magical spell to ward it off." At that point, you straightened up. He said, okay, enough of these parlor tricks. Life and death are already written in the stars. I don't pay for tricks. And as he turned to leave, part of him wasn't quite sure, because the man knew his name, he knew where he was from, and he seemed to know about this border skirmish that really nobody knew about from years ago. So on the third day, Yu sat quietly in his room. Beside him stood a klepstra, which is this narrow bronze water clock, kind of shaped like a wine vessel. So you'd always hear this dripping. And he'd listen to the rhythm, and each drop reminded him that, okay, still okay, the night is still mine. He locked the door, he lit the lamp, he drew his sword, and he just waited. So near the final watch, he heard something. It was this light scratching at the window frame. So he kind of looks over at it, and then he sees something that slid through the slats. and he sees this tiny man, no bigger than a toe, holding a halberd. A halberd is a pole weapon with a curved blade and a rear spike, and it was once used by elite guards. So this thing just dropped to the floor, and then immediately it grew into a full-size man, and it attacked. So Yu was ready, though, so he leapt, and then he struck, and his blade just bit into the thing's side. It staggered, twisted back towards the window, and then Yu slashed again. And then it fell back to this very small creature, and it crawled away fast like a little crab. And it went back and then found a crack in the floor. Yu was like, okay, I don't know what that was all about. That was crazy. What the heck was that? So he just sat there still. So he's like, I don't know if this thing's coming back. I don't know what's going on. And an hour passed, and then another. And then as he's sitting there, he hears something happening from that little hole in the floor. And he looks closely, and he sees this mud start to ooze through the hole, start to squeeze through, almost like mud going through a keyhole. It all kinds of starts to come in. This mass started to reshape. So it grew limbs. It had these hunched shoulders, and this neck that kind of cracked into place. So it took this form that was almost human, but not quite, because its limbs were too long, and the joints would seem to kind of bend in weird ways, and the whole body kind of sagged and shuddered, almost like it wasn't meant to carry its own weight. And for eyes, it just had two pits. It had this collapsed nose. It had this gaping mouth that almost looked like it had been clawed open from the inside. So it's scanning the room, and Yu's just standing there ready, and then all of a sudden he locks into Yu, and he with this jerking, unnatural speed, he comes right at him, arms outstretched, mouth gaping wide open, and he just tries to take a bite out of him. Now, fortunately, since Yu was ready, he braced, sidestepped, and struck the thing down the middle, splitting it clean with one blow. So then it kind of turns and is still swinging at it. And you just start slashing again. He's cutting off arms, he's cutting off the legs and everything. And it just kind of all just drops. And then these pieces just form back into this muddy ooze again, and goes back through the crack in the floor. So at this point, he's thinking, okay, I don't know what's going on. He pulls his chair closer to the window, and he's waiting. And then this bellow from outside, like an ox coughing thunder, right? The walls shook. The dust rained from the rafters. Yu kicks his door open and runs into the courtyard. And there, under the pale light of a bruised moon, stood this towering figure as big as the house, with limbs as thick as tree trunks and skin the color of scorched iron. Its surface seemed almost like it was plated in this lacquered armor, this deep black with glossy sheen, almost as if it had been dipped in molten ink and left to harden in the moonlight. But it was hard to see any seams from where the armor began and his body ended. So it almost looked like it was growing out from his body. Now, the face was expressionless. It was very smooth, and the eyes burned gold. So it wasn't like light, but it was like this molten metal ready to spill. It had no ears, no nose, just slits and hollows where the features should be. In one hand, it had this giant bow, and it had these massive arrows at its waist, and it took one out and shot it right at you. And so you just kind of jumped out of the way, deflecting the arrow. It shot another one. It hit the wall, and then the thing takes out this giant saber and tries to cut right into you. You dodged out of the way, and it hits this stone bench, and the bench just explodes. At that point, you darted under his leg. He struck an ankle with his sword, and then he turned back and struck the ribs at his back. The whole thing just screamed. It spun. It tried to attack him again, but it missed. And you just started slashing over and over until the whole thing just finally fell and didn't move anymore. At that point, Yu gets his lamp, he comes over, and he looks at it, and he looks closely, and it's like, it wasn't flesh. It was a wooden man, possibly a wooden effigy, because he had paint on him, and he had his weapons just tied on his side. But from every slash on his body where Yu had struck him, blood leaked. So at that point, Yu stepped back, and he was like, wait a second, what about those other two things? So he goes to look just below the window on the outside wall. So he sees this torn paper man and this smashed clay man. I thought, were these the first two things that attacked me? So he stared at it a long time. He didn't know what to think. He goes back into his room. At that point, then a few hours later, it's sunrise. His friends come over to check on him, and they see the destruction outside the house. They come into the room. They see the room just destroyed. They see you just sitting there, and they ask him like what happened? So he goes over the whole thing, and they couldn't figure out what's going on. But what they did realize was that only one man had known to warn him. So they said, well, let's go ask the fortune teller. Let's go see what he knows. He seemed to know what was going to that this was going to happen. So they go back and they find the fortune teller's stall was empty. So there was this cloth hung over the beams. It was just kind of like he had packed up and left. But one friend whispered, I think he's using concealment magic. Blood can reveal if he's hiding or not. So they just went to the end of the lane, to the butcher's shop, and they got a jar of fresh blood, and they come back, and they just start splattering blood all over his tent. And the vendors are coming out like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we think he's in there. And so they're splattering it all over, and then it seemed to have worked. This blood had broken whatever spell had cloaked him. And you could just see this man that kind of blinks into form, almost like mist resolving into flesh. And with a sizzle, the magic had failed. So at that point, the fortune teller realized they could see him, and so he just bolts. You and his friends just tackle him, take him to the ground, hold him. The guy's flailing, trying to get away, but they're holding him down. The other vendors start coming out to see what's going on. They said, get the guards. And so the guards come over, and at first they hear this story and they say, this is crazy. We don't know what you guys are talking about. And then you and his friends like, well, here's the effigy. Here is the paper man. Here is the clay figure. Look, here's all the stuff. And the officials are kind of like, okay, what is this? This is just stuff. Like, you can't just, hold this fortune teller because you have a bunch of broken toys. And so then one of the friends goes and calls over some of the vendors and says, hey, did you see this stuff in the fortune teller's stall before? And a lot of them were saying, yeah, actually that stuff is from the stall. But those guys had brought it with them. And so then they said, okay, let's look into this. We don't know if the story is true or not. But we're gonna hold the fortune teller, and we're gonna start looking into this. And very soon, as word got out, because at that point it's the talk of the town, the guards start getting word back that yes, there had been many people, possibly dozens of people, who had gone to see the fortune teller, and then those people disappeared. So at that point, they said, okay, we don't know if this is some sort of dark magic or if this is some sort of trick, but no matter what, this guy, he definitely seems guilty. They take the fortune teller in front of the judge, and the judge says, absolutely, this guy did it. That's it. I don't need anything else. He will be executed. So he was executed the next day. Yu goes and he takes the exams and he passes. And he goes on for many years to serve in the Ministry of Justice. And he was He was very calm and very rational and praised by many people. But then one spring day, years later, while he was traveling through a rural district in his official post, he passed a man alongside the road. Now, the guy just wore these plain clothes, but there was something about his shape, like his shoulders and the stiffness of his walk that made you turn and look at him again. And at that point, the man was gone. And you just stood there. And you thought, that face, I've seen that face before. He was certain. So that night, he ordered the registry opened and verified the name and execution date of the fortune teller. Then he made a quiet journey to the burial ground, and by his authority, the grave of the fortune teller was dug up, the coffin was opened, and inside the coffin was a wooden man. Painted face, dressed in the same robes, the same eyes, a faint trace of blood dried on the grain. He ordered the thing burned. For the rest of his life, he never spoke of it again. So this story comes from 聊斋志异, or Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, written over 300 years ago by Pu Songling. Now, it's not just a tale, it's one of many the author gathered from scholars, merchants, monks, and wanderers, people who swore these stories were true. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and share this with someone who still believes that not every threat can be seen. I'll see you in the next story.